Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our interesting panel with interesting folks. We're here to talk about taming the AI Hydra. For those of you that might not be up to speed on your ancient Greek mythology, the Hydra was a mythical beast that had multiple heads. And every time you would attack it, you potentially would cut off one of its heads. But for every head that was cut off, it would sprout two more. And the amazing hero Hercules actually did battle with the Hydra, but he required the help of friends, his son actually, to be able to finally defeat the Hydra, lop off its heads, and unfortunately, that was the undoing of Hercules' wife, right?
He took some venom from the Hydra in order to poison his arrows, and his wife accidentally ended up killing him with this venom.
That was Hercules.
That's kind of a sad part of the myth.
He defeated
Not
the
quite
beast, but was himself defeated.
Yes. So not quite sure how that lines into the...
Who's going to die while we tame
Exactly.
AI?
Well, let me tell you, Brian. So we are members within the Open Source Security Foundation. My name's CRob. I'm the CTO. We represent the subject matter experts in security across the Linux Foundation. We're a horizontal group. We work with all the 36 different Linux Foundation projects. And I'm a full-time employee, and I'll let my esteemed friends and panelists introduce themselves.
Yeah, Sarah Evans. I'm with Dell Technologies. We're a member of OpenSSF, and one of my roles in the company is to help activate Dell to participate meaningfully in OpenSSF. So talking about AI governance and some of the concepts that we're going to talk about today are very near and dear to my heart, and I hope that you find them as helpful as we have in putting them together for you.
And I'm Brian Fox. I'm co-founder and CTO of Sonatype. We are also a member of the OpenSSF, and I've been working with CRob and with Sarah many things for a number of years now. So excited to talk about this with everybody.
So we're here to talk about the AI problem, and we liken that to the Hydra, where it's a many-headed beast, and sometimes you might think you solved a problem, but you might have created some more. You want to get us started?
Sure. So how are we using AI in software development? So we've seen, this shouldn't be a surprise to many of you here. AI is up a lot. You might have heard of it. So these are some studies that we've been looking at. But 110% increase in AI models on Hugging Face in the last year. So this is a proliferation of the models themselves. This isn't even counting the number of times that they've been downloaded, right? What's interesting is there's only a small number of frontier or foundational models, but what we're seeing already is this massive, tuning, hacking kind of proliferation of models that are going on, and developers are grabbing them and using them all over the place, right? So you can see a very large step up in those things, and I think this will be a recurring theme as we talk about this, but this clearly is repeating history in terms of open source dependencies, but maybe on steroids.
Yeah, well, and that's my perception. I've had the opportunity throughout my career to kind of see the cycle go up and down several times. The migration from mainframe to distributed to services, services to cloud, and now cloud to AI. And as we the transition from services into the cloud is where open source really became the predominant model of development. And the current supply chain problems we used to deal with before AI were a lot of it involved with all the transitive dependencies that are available for developers to use. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it's almost like an all-you-can-eat buffet where you can just pick and choose and grab all these dependencies, but you're not necessarily doing your due diligence. You don't understand what might be in there. And with transitive dependencies, a lot of times things get snuck in there that you were unaware of. And from my perspective, I feel that the trend we are with AI, with the use of these AI models, and especially when you get into the agentic MCP space, this is very much parallels from my perspective of kind of transitive dependencies. And we're going to run into this problem of how do we understand what's in the program, what encompasses my AI system, and how do I understand and kind of control and protect myself?
Yeah, it certainly feels like we've seen this movie before.
Right.
With new actors. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll say the thing that I've observed is it seemed like when we went to the cloud or when we evolved to services, that you could have a governance, risk, and compliance team that after your applications were getting ready to go into production could come in and add that governance. And what I'm seeing with these end-to-end AI applications is it's bringing together unsolved challenges around data governance, these kind of new, how are the models working, how is the AI working, and software and new uses of software. And as it's all being combined into these end-to-end applications, it's requiring two things. Teams who may have never worked together before to have to start working together in order to accomplish governance. This is kind of what makes it a Hydra, so to speak. And then also kind of the introduction of new concepts. What do we keep? What has worked well in prior governance frameworks that still applies? And then what's the new things that we need to add? So it's pretty complex.
Yeah, I think the challenge, however, is everything is going so much faster.
Yeah.
You blink and there's 5 new technologies that you
Right.
have to
Right.
figure out and understand and deal with.
Whole new paradigms are being invented in the course of a summer, right? So this slide here, this tracks the change from 2023 to 2024. We don't yet have data on 25, but you could probably assume it doubled, if not more, again, right, in the rate. And so this is measuring 2 things. This is people who are including AI models in their software. And I'll admit, when I saw that in 23, I was like, that can't be right. People are already baking models in, but it was happening because there was no governance. Like, so people didn't have good ways to track it, and developers were like, why should I write all these heuristics? I can just include a model. And it was just flying in, just like we saw with open source dependencies over the last 20 years. And in 2024 and in 2025, I think we've seen an even bigger rise in the use of AI to actually write code. Right, so like last year, the tools weren't quite there. You know, Copilot came out, and it was early and it was neat. But I feel like this year and even over this summer, we've seen a massive explosion and iteration in those capabilities.
Well, absolutely, and that's where, again, reflecting back on history, we had a movement around big data, and that was, you know, in the early 2000s, where it brought non-developers into the fold, but in this case, it was generally business analysts, and they would use low-code, no-code, kind of WYSIWYG, GUI ways of developing business logic. And with generative AI and agentic especially, we are bringing in a whole swath of people that are not trained software engineers, they're not trained security experts. They might have an expertise in business logic or data science, but they don't understand the fundamentals of how to write quality software that is resilient and can be defended against.
Yeah, yeah. So some of the problems that we've started to see emerge, I mean, from my perspective, especially on the generative code side of things, there's a lot of studies that have gone on. I think we have here, that the generative AI is going to lead to more pervasive vulnerabilities, right? So if you have the ability to just throw code, sling code even faster, and you're doing it potentially without anybody even understanding it, because I'm apparently a Go programmer now. I created a command line in Go. I'm like a C and Java guy, but I did it, and I was like, that's cool. I don't know if the code's any good. Probably has some vulnerabilities in it. What do I know? It was just for my own use, and it's just a command line tool, so probably low risk, but you're going to see that a lot, right? The volume of these things is going to explode, and we're seeing and observing that the LLMs are struggling to, especially when we talk about open source dependencies, these things don't have the ability to understand what's happened since the model was trained. So GPT-5 came out, June-ish, May, June, I don't know when the last training set. It has no concept of dependencies that were created, versions that were released, or vulnerabilities that were disclosed since that time. You go back to GPT-4, GPT-4.5, they're talking a year prior to that. And in my own experience, I'm finding it's even further back than that. It's not even recommending versions that were new at the time. I learned this yesterday because Claude told me. I said, why did you pick that? And it said, well, I'm trying to find something that's been out for a while and probably stable, which is an admirable thing to do. But it meant it now picked a version that was even 6 months older than its training data, had no context of the latest stuff. So these challenges and being able to feed information into these models and these tools is really important. And that's why it was Anthropic that created the model control protocol, the MCP, right? So you have anything you want to add on that?
Well, I was going to note, I'll have to find the study, but consistently, the LLMs, no matter which one you're using, first off, they were trained on the internet, so any freely available, publicly accessible software. Last year, the State of the Octaverse report said that in the GitHub ecosystem, there were 518 million projects. And not every piece of software is created equally, has the same kind of care and attention, the professional behind it. A lot of this stuff is a prototype or a student project or somebody just experimenting. That's the type of data that gets fed into these systems and they're trained. But no matter if you're using Claude or Copilot or ChatGPT, they always consistently hallucinated similar packages saying that this dependency will solve this problem. And they're always, so if you were using OpenSSL, for example, the models would consistently suggest, well, here's OpenLLS version this, it doesn't exist. And it's just strange that the models all kind of suggested the same thing. And the attackers have noticed this, and they've started to post malicious packages based off of those hallucinated names, so that when you go out and try to pick up that dependency, you're potentially introducing malware into your system.
Right, so AI slop and dependencies. Basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so one thing that I would add is one of the things that's going to help us tame this AI governance Hydra, especially the software developers sitting in the room today, is we are having more active security conversations in the software development community than I've seen in previous tech inflections. And it's going to be kind of incumbent upon us as software engineers to help to activate the risk I don't know, the spidey senses of the people who work in security that may not understand exactly how the technology is being created as you're implementing it. And so something that I found that has been very helpful is to really start to dig into how it's being deployed and then the implementations, because outside of that, the risk surface is just so big. But if you can bring it down into how the new implementations that you're experimenting with are being deployed, then some of those security governance and controls that we've looked at in the past start to apply forward, and we'll begin to accelerate our governance conversations. There will be a delta of new things, but if we can build on the foundation of prior experience in governance, and then that'll leave us the delta of where we're innovating. I think that'll really help accelerate some of the risks with these new tools.
Yeah, I mean, as I'm listening to you think about that in our conversations before, what occurs to me is that, across multiple levels of this, I think we're all in a sort of an arms race here, right? Like, as developers, you're not learning these tools and getting proficient in them, you will be obsolete faster than you know, right? Because somebody not good as you, supplemented with AI, will be better and more productive than you. So there's a very legitimate reason for people to rush into this new technology at the individual level. I would say at the organizational level, the same is true. Like if your entire, if you have a very strict governance program and you're a company saying, no, we're not going to do anything with AI, and your competitors are, you have the same problem, right? And so I think more so than we've seen in the past, like with the adoption of open source, for example, the implications of like being too aggressive on governance are probably much more potentially catastrophic in this instance. And I think that's where, like we were talking about from a governance perspective, if you're in charge of that governance, getting in there with the people that are using it, trying to be part of the solution and not trying to stop it is going to be the most effective way to do it, right? Because it's going to happen. Whether those developers are doing it at home on their own time or not, whether your competitors are doing it, you have to take all of that into account, and it's a very different situation than we're used to.
And it's like all technologies, it's a double-edged sword. There are benefits and also risks. And the upside, like as you mentioned, if you are not evolving, learning how to use these tools, you're going to become obsolete. And these tools do offer the ability, they do some things amazingly well. They're able to kind of solve simple coding problems with great ease and efficiency. They're excellent at sifting through large volumes of data and kind of providing you summaries to help. But from my perspective, when I use AI in my security practice, I consider it like a junior business analyst or like a junior developer. It has some skills, but it doesn't necessarily have the holistic perspective that a more senior person might have. And that's how I always treat the data that's handed to me, is I view it with skepticism. Like it's interesting, it's helpful, it just saved me some time, but I do need to always check the homework.
That's right. And so while we've been talking about this, we've had this supply chain attack slide up here, which is not directly relevant to AI, actually. This is a different talk that I give. And if you weren't paying attention today because you were so enthralled in KubeCon, there was a massive NPM worm that was happening today. Did you see it? Yeah, like 60,000 packages. It was publishing a new package every 7 seconds to the NPM repo and replicating itself.
And so this is like the third major NPM
in like a month.
Worm in a month.
Yeah. I actually don't know if they have that under control right now. It was happening before we came up here. But that's not the point of this. The point of this is a pattern to understand, as the attackers have been much more sophisticated over different eras and doing this. And like I just said, the latest and greatest is now polymorphic worms. I saw an AI-based one that Google discovered like last week, I think it was. And so the point being here, we were talking about some of the challenges we saw with AI, like I mentioned the MCP stuff, and we were talking about this earlier. There is a massive proliferation of really useful tools that developers can now pull into their generative code. And I look at that and I go, that's super cool, also really, really scary, because I have that security and governance lens on it. And I was looking through things on the internet, as one does, and looking for intelligent root prompts to make my thing better. And what I discovered was people sharing like root prompts that had hundreds of MCP servers in it. And who knows who created those servers? It's sort of like, what could go wrong? Like, it's almost even worse in some cases than just randomly grabbing 1,000 different NPM dependencies, because depending on how these tools advertise themselves, your AI agent is shipping data off to them. So if these things are running in the cloud and you have no idea who's behind them, they may be, a supply chain attack just waiting to happen. So if watch this space, and you remember that I said that somebody's going to do it, and that MCP server is going to be hoovering all kinds of information out. It's inevitable.
And think about your earlier point, Brian, where you talked about how the robot was prompting you with older, stable software. We've had the opportunity to talk a lot about Log4Shell and how long the actual CVE itself was fixed incredibly quickly, but the long tail of getting that package deployed to the endpoints was years in the making, and it's still a super high percentage of people downloading the known bad package. And if the computer values stability over the latest and greatest, we're potentially it's going to be suggesting dependencies that may be valid, but could potentially have unfixed CVEs in them.
Yeah, for sure. I worry more about that data exfiltration, to be honest.
Absolutely. Just because how greedy these systems are, like grabbing data, and that get better through the more data you feed it. And you could very unintentionally expose confidential information unintentionally.
That's right. I think you wanted to talk about MCP-related stuff here as well.
Yeah, so I think that it's going to be important as we are looking at AI governance to be able to more prescriptively identify who are potentially all the different personas that you'll be interacting with that you may not have interacted with when you're creating a classic software application. And so as you start to work with people creating data sets, people creating models, and people creating agentic software, then we see within OpenSSF we've had 5 categories of people that we've classically worked with. We saw a gap when we started to say who are the people participating in end-to-end AI applications. We added them as sub-personas. So you'll see on the with the squares, kind of purple squares on the slide, we're starting to call out governance, risk, and compliance teams. We're calling out data czars. We're calling out chief AI officers, site reliability engineers, like a lot of these people that are coming together to help make these AI applications performative and consistently operate well. A lot of the fundamental knowledge came from data scientists and AI engineers that may not have had their, what I call shift security left moment, where they've realized what it means to maintain an application and operationalize it over time in production. And so now we have a lot of teams coming together to understand how these are being deployed so that we can understand the risks.
And sometimes to defeat the Hydra, you need to deploy another Hydra. All these different personas working together with their own unique subject matter expertise, bringing it together to have a more secure, robust solution.
Yeah, and I'm a big champion that the lessons that we've learned from DevOps and DevSecOps also apply to machine learning and our AI applications. And so we were participating and we released a white paper where we took the lessons of DevSecOps and we applied them to MLSecOps. And this is where we really break down the personas, we break down the things that are the same, the things that are different, and then how you can not start from scratch with your governance. And this is more kind of an operational piece versus just like the broad GRC, but it gives a really nice starting point for if you're starting to work with new teams that you haven't worked with before, how to get people speaking a common language.
Do you want to talk about the Safe MCP project real quick?
Yeah, and a really great example of that is we have a new special interest group that started up within our AI/ML working group, and it's focusing on mapping the MITRE attack framework specifically to the use of MCP tool calls with agents. And the reason we think this is important is because MITRE attack framework is very well understood by GRC teams and security teams, and so this is something that's helping to bridge the gap between how the tool works functionally and then how a governance, risk, and compliance team might come in and connect securing those MCP servers to a set of controls that they can use in the tooling they have. So I'm really excited about that effort. Frederick Kautz is co-leading that, and we think it has a great space to bring in expertise from people experimenting with MCP and then also as we're securing it within OpenSSF.
Great.
So from your perspectives, what do you see coming down the pipe in the next 6, 9, 12 months? What are some of the new Hydra heads that might be evolving we might need to react to?
Well, I have one that I think about a lot, and that is when we went to production with software applications, then usually a couple years later we had regulations because things broke or things got compromised. With AI applications, I don't think that we're going to get that same window of time where things like the Cyber Resilience Act and other regulations are going to take a 2 to 3 year pause before they go into play. I think about some of the same time that these AI applications are hitting production is about the same time that these acts like the Cyber Resilience Act will come into place. And so we're in this new phase where Pandora's box has been opened and we're potentially under attack from day one by cyber criminals. So we're going to have to really work with the security, GRC, governance folks as we're developing and figure out how to have those conversations in parallel of our development, because that's what we really need to go live day one.
And thinking about like the commercialization of open source projects, if you suck in a lot of these tools, a lot of these good or bad dependencies, when the CRA comes online, your organization is on the hook for the total security of these things. So if you don't understand all the components that are inside there, where your sources for these packages and libraries come from, how you can apply security controls across it, there's the potential that your organization could be on the hook for billions of euros in fines if you are, if you have some type of cyber breach or event.
15 million euro or 2% of global revenue turnover. So for some companies, that could be quite significant.
Right, and that's why we would advise leverage these technologies, but approach it with caution, and wherever possible, understand how this stuff works so that if there's some type of vulnerability or event in the future, you're able to quickly react and protect your organizations. And then also understand where your upstream sources are, because a lot of times you are leveraging the work of other developers. So if you don't have a relationship or even understand how to get a hold of them, you hold the bag on that technological problem. So you own that technology debt and you're on the hook to have a solution.
Yeah. And in terms of like, to your question, and then we'll open it up to questions, you know, like, what do I think is going to happen? I mean, I think we don't know. I've been making a lot of predictions on some of my articles and blogs as I think through some of this. I do think that, you know, MCP and some of the related, I think MCP as a concept will continue to evolve like all things, but I think the general concept of taking tool capabilities that are specialists and adding them to the LLM generative, which by definition are generalists, I think that's a pattern that is inevitable and going to continue. And I suspect that basically all tools in our space are going to evolve into an MCP style output, and the new interface will in fact be the generative thing of choice, whether it's Copilot or Claude or take your pick, right? And I think that's actually pretty cool because it strips away a lot of the stuff and allows the specialization to happen. But like I said before, the proliferation of those tools is going to be a potential disaster waiting to happen. And so like I think all things considered, I think we all have to figure out how to be very adaptive and fluid in this period. The norms are not well understood. I think the patterns should be recognizable, though. All things have the same patterns. We've seen this movie before, like we started in the beginning. And especially as it comes to governance, I think it's better to be flexible and adaptive and try to educate and not try to get in the way, because I suspect you'll probably just get steamrolled.
Absolutely. So we have a couple minutes of time for a question or two. There's a microphone in the center of the aisle. So if you have a question, please walk up and ask it. Otherwise, I'll make up a question. You may. Hold on. I'll do it even better. I'll Donahue you.
So many times when we say AI, it refers to different use cases, right? AI can be my developers are using AI to code. AI can be I'm building a model. AI can be I'm building an agent. It's a different use case, different attack techniques, whatever. So why aren't we referring to each one in a different way? And we're calling everything AI.
Yeah, I think that the term AI is very inclusive of a lot of different use cases, and the use case and the business use case and the deployment really kind of bring it down to the manageable conversation that a GRC team can have. So if I say, I'm scared of snakes, you're like, oh, let's describe that snake. Is it a garter snake? Is it a rattlesnake? Is it a boa constrictor actively wrapped around your body? Like those put very different, risk profiles in place. And so as you're working through GRC, getting shared terminology and kind of honing down the use case and the deployments, I think really is going to be necessary.
Yeah, I think, breaking that down too, are we talking about the models in the software? Are we talking about the tools you're using? All of these things. I mean, that's why we called it the Hydra, right? They are all of the different things and it's popping up all over the place.
And we'd be here all day if we said AI, ML, LM, generative AI, agentic, MCP, A to A. So it's just a nice shorthand, but you're absolutely right. Each one of those different techniques and technologies requires slightly different controls and practices. The MLSecOps paper focuses specifically around the machine learning and the LLM aspects of this, but you could have the similar paper, you could do a similar study around agentic or Gen AI.
Yep, and I think we have one more slide that we'd like to share.
Oh, did I have one more?
It's just kind of as we're closing, one of the things that we've seen is software developers are starting to use code in your software development. So OpenSSF has just released a free course available through Linux Foundation Education on just some secure software development practices for the developer. Use this, share this with people on your teams as a starting point. Sometimes we just have to start with us and what we can control, and Hydra sometimes seems really big, but as we're experimenting with using code, this is a piece of value we can begin to do in our development.
So we have about 60 seconds. Any one last question? All right, hold on.
Thank you so much. Okay, so you talked about emerging patterns and also about deriving lessons from like the alternate things that we've learned from and so on. And this other part, the white paper was around ML SecOps in terms of traditional AI ML development. But I wanted to see, based on your observation with different organizations that you all work for, have you seen organizations that are working with the Gen AI governance part well, and any aspects of that that you wanted to share, because there are a lot of security pieces involved with that as well. So, no, yeah, open question.
And that'll be the last question. Maybe we can talk a little bit offline, but because we're at time. But what I heard you ask was pieces of value specifically for generative AI governance. I would say understanding all the things that apply to software, because generative AI is data models and deployment with code, rolling forward everything you know about deploying code, and then adding the delta of models and data, and that'll kind of help scope down with your use case and your deployment, GRC for generative AI.
I'm aware of several insurance organizations and financial institutions that actually do have a really good handle on this, and they have specific governance of when using Gen AI is admissible or not, and how it's jailed within the organization, and how they go outside and use external services. So there are patterns, but I can't share names.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you all.